Alright, today I think I'm going to show how to make a traffic cone in Blender. First we'll delete the default cube and we'll create a cylinder with a Shift A and go up and do mesh and cylinder. Over here on the left we can modify the parameters. I think we'll probably want a little bit smaller of a radius, right, and the depth of, probably only 1 meter or so. Right. I think that should be good for now. Let me also put in, I like to put in a armature, a human armature for reference, just to get the size and everything correct. I'm going to hit 1 on the numpad to go into the front orthographic view. Bring this up. I think that looks to be about the right height. Right, it comes out just about to the waist of the human, which seems about right. I'll bring that up maybe a little bit more since we're going to do some extruding on the bottom. And I think that looks good. I'll go over here to the right and I'll hide the rig for now. And here we have the cylinder. Right, with that selected, we'll hit tab and go into edit mode. Hit 3 to go to face select, and that lets me select the top face, and I want to scale that down a little bit. So I'm going to hit S. I'm going to do a Shift Z to scale only in the X and Y direction and not scale in the Z direction. That lets me scale it like this. I think, for a cone it should be good, maybe right about there, right? And then, hit it with a Control B and bevel. And then we can move the mouse out a little bit. And that lets me add a little bit of a bevel around on that face, just to make it not as sharp, right? So I think that's good for the top of the cone. Let's go down to the bottom, select the bottom, extrude downwards just a little bit, and I also want to scale that in the X and Y directions with the Shift Z as before, and that lets me have something that looks kind of like that. And I'll extrude it down just a hair like that for the base of our cone. Right. So now we have something that looks kind of like a cone. So I'm going to go ahead and we want to add stripes, so I'll do a Control and R, and I'll scroll up. That way I can have 4 loop cuts there on the vertical part, and that lets us have 2 stripes on the cone, right? I click and that lets me slide them to adjust. I think we'll do them a little bit towards the top, so right about there seems fine. Click again and that'll make that happen. Alright, so I think we're good for modeling there, so I'm going to hit tab and go back out of the modeling mode and we'll go into shading. Right, for shading view, up here at the top, if you don't have that, click the plus and you should find it under general and then shading. Right, that's a shift and a middle mouse click and drag, and lets me pan around and position it more in the center of the view. Hit new, we'll call this the traffic cone orange material. We'll use this to get an orange material for that, and then we'll add others so we can have a dark, different color base, and we can have the 2 stripes be more reflective. So for this, for this material, we'll do Shift A, and I like to go and add a noise texture. Usually is the first thing I do for everything. I'll do a Control Shift and click on that node, and that lets me view that texture. And I'm just going to do this so that way I can add some variation to the base color with, so that way instead of being a solid color of orange, I can have it be a little bit, varied color of orange. Right, just to simulate, for real life, if it had different colors, variation. Adds it a little bit more interesting. I'm going to scale this up a little bit just to make it a little bit more like that. I'm going to do a Shift A, go to Converter, and I'm going to grab a color ramp. And this will let me control kind of the noise texture, right? So if I slide these, I can increase contrast. And that lets me have a little bit finer control over that variation in color that I want to have. Right, but how do we actually put this into actual colors? We're going to go to Color, Mix RGB. and we'll plug the output of the noise into the factor. Control Shift on the mix node, and now I can choose two different colors here in the color 1 and color 2 slots, and that lets me mix those two colors together. Right. You know, maybe a traffic cone's probably a little bit brighter than that, right? Just kind of choose colors that seem to make sense. Right, now that looks a little bit weird, doesn't it? So we'll go back to the color ramp, and I think we'll actually decrease some of that contrast and go back. That looks a little bit okay. I'll adjust this down just a hair like that. I think that looks like a good, nice orange traffic cone color. These do look almost the same, so I'm going to do that and just get it a little bit different. And that will plug into the base color on our principled BSDF. Control Shift on the principled BSDF, and this will show us what the actual resulting material will look like. One thing you'll notice, it's all these faces. You can tell the difference between the faces, and so we don't want that. We want it to be smooth shaded. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and shade smooth, and that'll shade the entire thing smooth. I do want to go into edit mode though, hit 2, so I'm selecting the edges like that, right? And I'm going to go in here. I want to select this, so I'll do Alt and click on that, and that lets me select all of that. Right click, and I should be able to find a shade somewhere in here, a shade smooth. I have it already on my quick functions, right? Shade smooth, shade flat. We want that to be flat, right? And actually, I think we kind of want these whole faces to be flat, so I'll just do an Alt on that, and that lets me select all those faces. I have it bound to Q, shade flat. And if you don't have that, I believe you can press F3, and you can type, shade flat, shade smooth, and then you can just right click it, add to quick favorites, or remove from quick favorites from there. Right, so that makes it so that way now we have a sharp edge there, but no sharp edges around in the center of the cone. So that seems good. I do want to actually make this one face be sharp or shade flat as well, just so that way it has a little flat bit on top. And I think for the bottom I also want that to be flat. Right. Okay, so I think that's good for that. We'll go ahead and probably be good to save this. So I will save this somewhere. Right, and then from there we can go back to the material. Obviously we want this to look a little bit more realistic than this. This kind of looks plasticky, and I think the way I like to do that is I like to add some roughness. So usually I'll use noise to do roughness, and sometimes I'll use the same noise, sometimes I'll make a new noise node. But for this, I'm going to go ahead and get another color ramp out. That lets me have some more control, again, over the noise for the roughness. And, we want probably a little bit more contrast, right? One thing to note, though, is that we don't really ever want anything to be completely smooth. We don't really want things to be completely rough. So I do want to actually go and click on the bottom end of this ramp, and you can also use this to select the different ones. Click on this part here, and that lets me change the color there. And I'll just slide that up a little bit. That way we're not completely going to be smooth at the darker colors of the color ramp. That's a Control Shift on the principled BSDF, and that lets me go look here. And that's looking fairly good. I think I do want to actually lower that down just a hair. You can see a little bit. If I bring that up, it's much shinier. If I bring it down, it's not so shiny. Right. The idea being that, the orange part's not the super reflective part. That'll be a part we'll add later in those two stripes. All right, so I think that looks reasonable for now. And I think that's all we really need to do. Metallic is obviously 0, and we don't really care about normals for this. Alright, so that's probably it for that one. Hit a Control S to save that. Now how do we want to add the stripes and change the base color? Over here, you look for this little icon that says Material Properties. When you hover over it, click that, and you'll have a little doohickey over here. There's a plus and minus on the right. We're going to hit the plus 2 times to add 2 new material slots, and this gives us 3 slots. We already have one that's assigned to the whole thing, and then there's 2 empty ones. So I'm going to create a new material for slot number 2, and I'm going to call that Traffic Cone Reflective, right? That'll be for our 2 stripes, and then I'll have another one that I'll create a new one, and that will be Traffic Cone Base. For the base color. We'll go up to reflective now, and you'll note that there's nothing on our model that has the reflective material. So let's fix that. We'll go tab into edit mode, hit 3 to make sure we're selecting faces, and what we want to do is select this area and this area. So I'm going to click one face there, hold Alt and click, and that lets me select that whole thing. Go over here on the right, and I'll select the traffic cone reflective material, and then click assign, and that lets me assign to the selected faces that material. So I'll do that here again. Click on a face in that stripe, hold Alt and click in that, and that lets me select the whole strip of quads there, and then I'll click reflective and hit assign over here on the right. Right, and now we have that, and that color is honestly very close to I think what we eventually want it to do and want it to be. While I'm in edit mode, I'll go ahead and add the base to be the base. Now for doing that, I can do that and then, try and select this as well, right? But I found it's hard to select this. So I'm actually going to do a different method. I'm going to press Z, and that lets me choose between the different view modes. I want wireframe so I can see through everything. Press 1 on the numpad, and that'll let me go ahead and do the orthographic front view. I'm going to click B, and I'm actually going to go in here and select like that. Pressing B gives me the box select, right? Now I can middle mouse click and drag and see to make sure I selected everything I wanted to. I think I did. So I'm going to hit Z and go back to solid just to make sure it looks like everything is correctly selected. Yep, it looks like they are. Now I can go over here, click base and hit assign, and that'll assign the base there. Hit Z and go back to material preview, which is what you want to be in when you're in the shading node. And hit tab to go back to object mode. Alright, so we have the base at the base, and we have 2 stripes that have the stripe. Alright, so in here in our shader editor, I want to select the slot that has the traffic cone reflective, so I can do the stripes first. Let me just focus this on where we're looking. Zoom in a little bit here, and of course, as usual, I am going to create a noise texture. Right, and this can help me, control shift on that, and that should let me see it. Of course, the scale is too low, so I'll increase that. And that'll give me a little bit more variation there. I can actually bump up the detail if I like, and that'll increase or decrease the frequencies of the noise. So lower is bigger, blobbier noise, and higher is smaller, finer noise, right? You can kind of see if I do that, it's a very different change. So I want something, right about there for detail. Roughness also can do that too. Alright, so that looks good, I think, for noise. I also want to, though, how when you see traffic cones, there'll be a little bit of like a hexagon kind of view. I'm too lazy to actually do hexagons. I'm going to do a Voronoi. I think that looks fairly similar. Control shift on that. We got to scale it, right? So we got to do this so we can see it smaller, just like that, right? The one gotcha with this is that we'll have weird behavior, I think, when it's angles, because it's not projected on completely the way I think I want. I believe I want not F2, I think distance to edge, potentially, right? Is kind of what I want. Just to add, we're going to plug this into the normal, that way we get a little bit of variation in there, right? So that, I think, looks, reasonably okay. Maybe, increase the scale a bit more, just to make it so it's super, super small. And you can see as I do that, it has some weird behavior because the texture is being projected on over here, but it's also being projected on in a different spot over here. And so when I increase scale, it slides those and they merge and meet together in the middle, and it has a weird effect at the edges where they merge. Right? So there's another slot where it's sliding back and forth. But of course, that's all fine and good. Shift A, and we want to add a converter for a color ramp, as we always do. And click and drag and press G, and that'll let me move these over a little bit out of the way. And that's because I want to be able to modify this a little bit, right? Just to make sure we're doing this right. I think I want to make it be a little bit more bright. And then also at the bottom end, I want to bring that color up just a hair. I don't want it to be a super, super strong. Right, so this piece we're going to plug into the normal at some point, and this can be a little bit of a color, right? So we'll take this and stick that in the base color and see how that looks just for now real quick. Right, it's a little bit weird, honestly. Of course, we don't have a color ramp on that, so let's stick a color ramp on there. I think really we want it to be mostly white. Just a hair of variation. So I'll put that up and bring this a little bit closer together just to get just the slightest bit more variation, right? I think that looks okay for now. We'll come back and tune it later once I have everything hooked up. Roughness. Roughness, we can probably just set that to be 0. Let's just take a look at this and see what we have for now. Right, you can see this part is super, super reflective, and this part is a little bit more rough, right? So we'll go back here to our color ramp, right? And we want to, Shift A, go to vector, and then bump. And this will let me turn that height, right? Because this is basically the height map. It'll let us turn that into the normals, right? And so just, to sanity check, Control Shift, click on that, and this shows us the normals. These are very crisp normals. We want to turn the strength down, and we want the depth to be down because it's just not going to be that much of a depth. Honestly, 0.05 is probably okay for depth or for distance. Decrease strength. I really just want it to be a nice, faint little thing like that, right? And that way it's primarily, the different colors on each different area, like primarily dark blue, primarily the cyan, primarily yellow, and primarily magenta here. And that'll let, it not be too weird of a look. Usually I have to tweak normals like that. And we'll go ahead and take this and plop that into our normal on the shader, and we'll Control Shift and click. Give it a little second of a bit, and we'll see now that we do have a little bit of the variation there. Kind of like how you see hexagons on the regular old cones, right? I do think that actually this is too much darkness. Usually it'll be a little bit less. Do like that. You get just a little bit of imperfections, but not too much. Alright, that's probably good for the reflective. Don't forget to Control S and save that. And now we'll go on, click here on the slot number and go to traffic cone base, which is in slot number 3. And then we're going to add noise texture just for some color variations, right? We'll Control and click on that, and we'll do, maybe a little bit of a scale like that. Maybe this time we can make it a little less rough, who knows, right? And we want to add a color, mix RGB, and then we'll stick this into the factor, Control Shift on that. I do want to add a converter, or a color ramp from the converters. And then here I can choose, I want this to be, 2 different colors of black and gray, basically. Right? Already, even that looks pretty good. Maybe we'll increase the chunkiness or the contrast on that. Right? seems okay. Plug that into the base color and we'll Control Shift on that and see how that looks. We do want that to be kind of rubbery, so I'm going to bump that roughness up quite a bit. And honestly, that looks fairly decent to me, right? We're not going for something that's, you know, super perfect. Right, so we've got this material set up, right? We've got this material set up, and we've got this material set up. So how do we bake this out? Well, we're going to select the cone tab, press A to select all the faces, and hit U to unwrap. And then I like to use just Smart UV Project, increase the margin on the islands by 1 or 2 clicks to the right. Just that way, for floating point error, it won't have weird behavior around the seams. And we'll go ahead and tab back out of that. Or actually, I'll leave it in that. I'm going to change this to the UV editor so you can see the UVs. Right, there's our unwrap on the left here. It's not super well packed to, you know, fit all of the size and the texture, but I'm not really picky, and I'm not going to bother trying to change that for now. That's not the point of this. So let's go ahead then and figure out how to bake. To bake, we got to go up here to Render Properties, change it to Cycles, right? Cycles, and then we're going to go down here to where it says Bake. Alright, in order to bake, we need to have a texture that is selected in the materials we want to bake. We want to bake these 3 materials in these 3 slots. I will do a Shift A, Texture, and Image Texture. That lets me go and make an image texture. Now I'm going to call this Traffic Cone Diffuse. And I'm going to leave it at 1024, 1024. Right, if you want more detail, you can bump that up. I don't think it's worth it. If you're making a game, you don't want to use up all of your memory with textures. So, Traffic Cone Diffuse. There, slot number 1. Slot number 2. Shift A, Texture, Image Texture. We're going to select that same texture. We don't need to create a new one. We want it to all go to the same one texture. Slot 3. Texture, Image Texture. Select the same one. Alright, so now, important thing to note here is that when you're baking, it will bake to the texture that is selected in the shader editor. So if I click over here, it will not be able to bake. I have to be clicked on that for each of these slots if I want it to bake. Alright, baking out diffuse. Let me go over here and open the image editor so we can just see Traffic Cone Diffuse. Alright, over here on the right, bake type. I want diffuse. Alright, contributions. Turn off direct and indirect light. That will bake the lighting to it. I do not care about the lighting. I left this point light over here. But otherwise, you will get a black image and wonder what is going on. Only have color selected here. Alright, we have the object selected. We have the texture selected in each of these in our materials. In each slot, it's the same texture. I just unselected it there. So now I'm going to hit bake. It'll take a little while, it'll rev up, it'll do its thing, and then it'll chunk out the output over here on the left. Give that a couple minutes. Alright, and here over here on the left, you can see that we have our diffuse material all nice and baked out, complete with color variations, all that. All 3 of those different shader materials all on the same texture. This is great. Alright, I'm going to click here, I'm going to go to image, I'm going to save as that puppy, right? Traffic Cone Diffuse. Sure thing. Yep, save as image. Alright. Now then, we want to do, right, because we're doing PBR, we want to do, you know, the diffuse, the roughness, maybe metallic. There was no metallic in this, so I'm not going to bother with that one, right? You know, bake the textures you need. And then we'll also need to do, of course, normal, because of the normals on that reflective surface. So I'll go over here. I'm going to click this little doohickey here that has the 2 kind of pages next to each other. That's the new image button. We'll call that Traffic Cone Roughness. I'll leave it at the same size. You don't really want to have 2 different sizes baked of the same model. It's just weird. Do that. Now each slot, go over here and change this to be selecting the roughness one. Go to the third slot, do that again. Alright, make sure each of those is selected. Alright, go over here. We're going to select roughness so we can see it. On the right, go to roughness. Alright, bake type roughness. Alright, there's no, lighting, whatever thing to select. So we are going to go ahead and hit bake and come back and we'll see what the roughness looks like. Alright, now we have here the roughness map. If you look over here, it's very rough on the base. That's okay, we didn't add any variation on that, but also look over here and we've got all of the variations we had for the color on the orange. We've got no variations, right, because we wanted the reflector to be completely smooth, and it's all baked nicely where it needs to go. Alright, we'll go over here. Make sure you save as that puppy. Traffic cone roughness.png, save as. Alright, next we want to do normals, I think we said. So click over here, create a new texture. We're going to call that traffic cone normals. Leave it at the same size and hit OK. Go to all the slots and select that texture. Oh, not roughness, normals. Make sure you didn't accidentally select roughness. Make sure that all those texture nodes are selected. Alright. Go over here, bake type, normal. Right, not to be confused with abnormal. Hit bake, and we'll come back and see when that's baked. Select it over here, of course, in the image editor as well, so we can see what it looks like. Alright, now this is looking like it's maybe not the right thing, right? So let's go zoom in. Remember, the only thing we did normal differences on in the nodes was on the little stripies. So let's go look and zoom in over here, and as you can see, there is in fact actually normals variation there. Note that it's not super high res. If we wanted this to be better, we would probably increase our texture size. We don't care. It's going to be in a game. It's not going to be super high res anything. Save it as traffic cone normals, save. Right? If we did care, just bump up the size, do 2048 size textures, or rearrange your UVs so there's more space encompassed by those UVs, or something like that, right? But for this, it's just a quick, no one's going to look this closely at your texture to see, oh, is it really Voronoi? And in fact, the lower resolution makes it so you can't tell that it's Voronoi and not hexagons or something else. So I call that a feature, not a bug. We'll Control S, make sure we saved the whole thing. We saved all the textures. That's great. Let's hop into Godot and we'll see what it's like in Godot. Actually, one more step. We need to actually export this as a data type that we can import into Godot. So you can do GLF or GLTF, GLB, or you can do OBJ. For some reason this is experimental OBJ. Or you can do non-experimental OBJ. So I'll just do regular OBJ, I'll do selection only, that way it's only the cone and not the lights. Objects, yup, great, okay, great, yup, okay. Write normals, include UVs, write materials. It'll write materials, so maybe we'll be able to have all the materials written for us. That's great. We could triangulate faces, we could not, it doesn't matter. Right, traffic cone, OBJ, export. And now we'll go into the Godot and see how it looks. Okay, here we are in Godot. This is just a new test project I created. There's nothing here, of course, so I need to go and put the saved artwork I created into this folder for Godot. So I need to make sure I get the cone material, diffuse materials, roughness, normals, all that. Control C that, and I'll stick it into the folder. You can't see this, of course, but you will see it once it updates in here. And now we have them over here. So I'm just gonna, work with the default scene I have that I created in 3D, drop in the OBJ, see what I get. see what I get. Oh, I need to add the as a material instance, mesh instance node, of course. Mesh instance 3D, great. OBJ goes in here. Perfect. Looks like that. That's great. Okay, we got all this stuff. That's wonderful. Perfect. Magnificent. Godot does not import material files. That's why I didn't get the material. But, in any case, I can simply go over here, right-click, new resource. It's spatial material. This is Godot 4, so we'll see. I'll just call it material. Right, and here's the materials you have. We want, you know, just the standard. Right. Physically based, the components can use an ORM. We don't have ORM. Just do standard. Create. This is our new standard material. We'll call it traffic cone material. Yay. Alright, traffic cone material. I have it open here on the right. There's all this stuff for shading and blah blah blah. Go to albedo. Albedo is the same as diffuse. Take the diffuse, drop it into the texture. Perfect. That's great. Metallic, there is none. Roughness. Traffic cone roughness. Goes into the texture slot. Perfect. Normal map. We want to enable the normal map because we created a normal map. Put that in there. Great. Perfect. Over here up at the floppy disk icon, we hit save. Perfect. Alright, go back to our mesh instance. Surface material override. Or I think we can click on here and do surface. Right. These are all the surfaces, because remember, these are the 3 different slots we have the materials for. And we're going to just stick the same, oh, that's not it, this is it. Same material in all 3 of those. Alright. And look at that. We've got the 3 materials all on our mesh. Perfect. Alright, you can tell, of course, it is pixely. That's because of the low resolution of 1024. If you care, you can change your resolution, have higher resolution. You could align your UVs to be aligned, you know, vertically as pixels, which honestly might be a great idea. Or you can just not care. It's going to be a traffic cone. It'll be in the side. It doesn't need to be super high res. And if you look also, you can see the little variations there. And the best part is that, you know, it's low enough resolution that you can't tell that that's even Voronoi. So that's how you create procedural textures and bake them to be able to have them in Godot.